This is Matthew Kratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk a little bit about the Ethereum dumpster fire. It's actually unbelievable how bad this dumpster fire has gotten. So to talk about it, we first need to know what the Commodity Futures Trading Commission is, the CFTC. This is a U.S. government agency that's in charge of regulating U.S. derivatives markets like futures, swaps, and they are in charge of especially futures that trade based on commodities like crude oil and corn and wheat, etc. So that's the CFTC. Up until recently, the CFTC has been asking to regulate both Bitcoin and Ethereum and designating both of them as commodities. Bitcoin is clearly a commodity. This is something that the US government and all the regulatory agencies agree on. What's been up for debate is whether Ethereum is also a commodity. And until recently, the CFTC was calling it a commodity. Now, commodity is something very neutral. It's something that's not issued by a government or a corporation, and it's not something that can be changed by a small group of people. So as we said, think crude oil or gold or corn or something like this. No one can deactivate the gold that's sitting in your home safe. It can't be turned off or censored in any way. But by contrast, Ethereum, Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation can certainly deactivate any ETH that you're holding. They can turn it off. They can roll back the chain in order to target certain actors. And this is what they did with the chain rollback after the DAO hack in 2016. A commodity is not something, it's not something that's issued by a software company like Ethereum or Cardano. And these are software companies that are pretending not to be software companies. If you're a software company and you issue a token, an equity token, that is a security. And just because you did your ICO, which is the equivalent, sort of the analog of the IPO, but just because you did your ICO in Japan or Switzerland, and of course the reason you did this was to skirt US securities laws, just because you did your ICO there does not absolve you from registering as a security, registering your token as a security with the SEC, especially if it's going to be traded on US exchanges like Coinbase. Ethereum is a software company. Vitalik is the CEO. He's the leader in charge. ETH is an equity token that was issued to fund software development in order to make money for investors. Therefore, ETH passes the famous Howey test and is a security. This is a project that's controlled by a few key people at Consensus, which controls all the Ethereum infrastructure like MetaMask and Infura, and the Ethereum Foundation. And these two, probably the two most powerful people in the project, are Vitalik Buterin and Joe Lubin. And it looks like the CFTC chief is waking up to these facts. And recently, just a couple days ago, he said now that Bitcoin is the only commodity. And it's funny that he says this in the wake of the FTX collapse, because it turns out that Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, was a big friend of the CFTC, and he was trying to bring a lot of these tokens under the jurisdiction of the CFTC, promising them a lot more power and increased revenue. So I think this was one reason that the CFTC head was a little bit confused. He was confused by the money hanging in front of his eyes, and now that SBF is gone and the money is gone, he is now waking up to the fact and saying, well, you know, Bitcoin really is the only commodity. SBF's no longer dangling the money carrot in front of him, so he's sobered up. The thing is, the CFTC head, even if he got a lot of money from SBF, he cannot rewrite U.S. financial history. He doesn't have the power to change the Howey test just because his agency would have received a lot of money under the legislation that was proposed by SBF. And now that SBF is gone, CFTC is backing away. This is very, very bad news for Ethereum, as this virtually ensures that it will now be regulated in the US as a security. A lot of people say, is this really such a bad thing? Don't they just have to file some paperwork and pay a registration fee and then go on with business as usual? No, it's actually a really bad thing for Ethereum because of all the disclosures that they're going to need to make. And we talked about this in a recent video. They're going to need to disclose the normal stuff you disclose, for example, when you take your company public. Who's in control, who the chief officers are, who the executives are, who's on the board, how much, and then very importantly, how much ETH do these people hold? What are insider conflicts? Is there any insider dealing going on or self-dealing going on? What are risks to the project? And one way of thinking about this is you can do the thought experiment. Imagine if FTX and SBF and Alameda had to register with the SEC a few years ago. Their little game would have been up years and years ago because it was rife with insider dealing and corruption. and fraud. And this is what's going to happen with Ethereum. If Ethereum ever needs to file an S1, which is what you file before you go public, or some equivalent, investors are going to scatter faster than rats trying to leave a sinking ship. This is the problem for Ethereum having to disclose all these nasty things. This is, I'm going to link below. This is the S1 that was published by Coinbase before they went public, and you can see all the things you have to disclose. And this is for the safety of investors, so they know any material information that would affect their investment, risk factors, prospectus, use of proceeds, management, executive compensation. Imagine if we knew these things. There's a lot of dirt inside the Ethereum Foundation, and the reason you know this is because they went to large lengths to basically skirt registering in the US, and they're controlled by a few insiders. It's very, very similar to scam, bankster, fraud, and FTX. And one way of telling this, for example, is whenever there's a rumor that Vitalik Buterin has died. There was a rumor a couple years ago that he had been killed in a car accident. The price of ETH plunges. So even the free market understands that Vitalik is the founder and he's extremely important to the project. This is not something we have to worry about with Satoshi. Now, the next item on the agenda is talking about Coinbase censoring Ethereum. This was something that I hypothesized 3 months ago would happen. A couple of people on Twitter asked Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, if regulators asked you to censor Ethereum at the protocol level with your validators, with your stakers, would you do that, or would you just shut down what you were doing? Brian Armstrong replied, it's a hypothetical we hopefully won't actually face, but if we did, we would go with B. We would shut down our staking. And it turns out that this is not, in fact, what Coinbase has done. And so, in my opinion, Brian Armstrong is a liar. Here's Coinbase. They are currently censoring 67% of blocks in order to make them OFAC compliant and in order to make the US Treasury happy. This is not exactly how you want your cryptocurrency revolution to look, where you have large publicly traded corporations that are applying censorship at the protocol level. Now, Vitalik Buterin's a liar too, because he said that if anyone ever did this, if they censored blocks, that he would slash their stakes. And of course, he's been very quiet about this and has not done it. So they're both liars, in my opinion. And this saying comes to mind: it's difficult to make a man understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And this is exactly what's happening here. The ETH merge has been very, very good for Coinbase. They're making a huge amount of money from staking ETH, staking their customers' ETH. And unfortunately, they're applying censorship in the process. And so this is something, basically, Vitalik was not true to his word and Brian Armstrong was not true to his word. And these are, again, if Ethereum had to file a prospectus, a lot of this would be front and center. The last thing I want to talk about is this fact that if you've staked ETH, you still cannot withdraw it. There's no code. The code to withdraw it has not even been written. It looks like in the collapse, and this had been pushed out, people were saying, well, it's not going to happen until 2024 or 2025. I think the collapse of FTX and all these problems have awakened Vitalik, and he realizes now that he's in trouble. He better allow people to withdraw their ETH. This is a really bad look. So they're now saying, ETH devs are saying that people may be able to withdraw their ETH. Hopefully, when I say we, it's none of us, because I don't own any ETH, but hopefully people will be able to withdraw their ETH by March of 2023. So just in a few months from now. The funny thing about this, again, these are other signs that ETH is a security. It offers a yield, just like a dividend or some return of cash flow. There are a few key decision makers who get to decide when and where and how you get your money back when your ETH will be unstaked. And this is exactly what a security is. The other problem with this is there's this huge overhang of ETH waiting to be dumped on the market once it can be finally unstaked, maybe in March of 2023. I know from the YouTube comment section and my Twitter DMs that many of you were suckered into the ETH staking rat trap many months ago, and you're waiting to dump everything once you're allowed to withdraw your ETH. And this is obviously a huge overhang and a huge uncertainty surrounding ETH, and I think it's quite bearish for it. If we take a look at the numbers, currently almost 13.5% of the ETH is staked and cannot be withdrawn. Almost $21 billion worth of ETH out of $154 billion market cap. So this is, we don't know how much of this ETH will hit the market when it's unstaked, but we can imagine that there are a lot of people who are quite unhappy with ETH's performance over the past few months. The fact that ETH is, that the stakers are actively complying with government censorship, etc. And so this is definitely a risk factor. Again, what this is about is Bitcoin, not crypto. And as we see in video after video, crypto is a parasitical movement that lives off of its host, Bitcoin. All these altcoins are parasites. And there are a number of ways of demonstrating this. The obvious way, the first way is that obviously Bitcoin came first and everyone did their copies of it and their little changes. But here's a big one. Crypto bull and bear markets just coincidentally happen to take their cues from Bitcoin's 4-year halving cycle. This shows who's really in the driver's seat, and that's Bitcoin. The other thing is the way crypto markets itself, and we've talked about this many times. You have Bitcoin affinity scams like Do Kwon. For example, I love Bitcoin, so buy my Terra Luna token because we're buying Bitcoin too. That would be a Bitcoin affinity scam. A Bitcoin FUD scam would be all the criticisms of Bitcoin. So you use Bitcoin to get visibility and to get clickbait and to get your headlines out, and then you say Bitcoin uses too much energy, buy my coin instead. And this is exactly how Vitalik has operated, criticizing proof of work, even though he knows better because he's a technologist, but using it as a way of selling his own coin, and also attacking, coming up with this label, Bitcoin maxi pads, Bitcoin maximalists, as an attack vector on Bitcoin. So we see right through these guys. They really are like the kind of guy who walks up to you next to you in the urinal, sort of gross person who would do something like this. I also like this meme. We're all in this together, as they're actively campaigning to ban proof of work. And then down here, a little mouse saying, I guess decentralization was important after all. Here's Bitcoin. This is really the story of 2022. Bitcoin separating from all of this. And Bitcoin always has been separate, but hopefully in the public's mind, the separation is becoming more and more clear. One way it becomes clear is these tokens just go to zero. When FTT goes to zero, it's no longer an alternative to Bitcoin, and people have to get burned to learn these lessons the hard way, unfortunately. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.